Youest You listener, I'm so grateful to be here today with you. As always, I know you have many places you can be, and I'm so thankful to be part of your listening and growth experience. And just as always, thrilled to be in your earbuds. And I'm really excited for today's guest and to introduce her to you. So let me tell you about Sue Ludwig. Sue is a sought after speaker, consultant, and writer, a licensed occupational therapist and certified neonatal therapist. She is president and founder of the National Association of Neonatal Therapists. And she has used a blend of clinical expertise, innovation, and leadership to support the advancement of this specialized field at a global level. So cool. Sue is the media expert in neonatal therapy for the American Occupational Therapy Association, a member of the steering committee for the National Coalition for Infant Health, and a medical advisory board member for HOPE for HIE. She has received the Laura Edmonds Lectureship Award from UMass Memorial Medical Center, the Individual Contribution to Maternal and Child Health Award from the National Perinatal Association, the EntreLeadership Momentum Award from Ramsey Solutions, and the Alumni Professional Achievement Award from Eastern Kentucky University. Whoa, lots of awards. She has also been named a Graham's Foundation Resilience honoree. Sue's book, Tiny Humans, Big Lessons, which if you're watching, I'm putting up here on the camera, was published in March of 2022. Today, Sue lives in Cincinnati, Ohio, with her husband and a few dogs and has two grown children. Oh my gosh, Sue, I'm so excited to have you here. And wow, you are like, there's a lot of awards there. That's pretty amazing.
I'm
Thank
so
you for
excited.
for for sharing yourself.
Yeah,
Yeah.
thank you so much for inviting me. I'm excited to be here and excited to get to know your listeners. I can't wait.
Well, I got to tell you, I think it was we both, I think, have the mutual friend, Dr. Jill Bolte Taylor,
Mm.
who was like, Julie, you will love Sue. And I love Dr. Jill. She's been on here a few times. For those listening, she wrote Whole Brain Living. And she's like, you will love Sue. And like we met and I was like, oh my God, this woman you're so humble. Like I'm like, wait a minute. I didn't know all these awards. Like you're very humble about what you're up to. And just appreciate you. I appreciate the work you're doing in the world. And I already have so many questions, but thank you for spending some time here and just sharing your wisdom, your experience, your strength, and what you're working on, because I think it's really important.
Well, thank you so much. Yes, Jill is amazing, and I'm so grateful to her for introducing us.
I want to begin with, I think, just to maybe give a little to level set and get people a little more familiar with you and your background. Were you always interested in kind of the neonatal infant education sphere? Like, how did you get into this whole career? And maybe take us back a
Yeah.
little bit, bring us up to speed.
Yeah. So, I was always interested in the NICU because I had early on some nephews and members of my family that were born prematurely. And I was the youngest of five. So that all happened when I was still sort of in high school and college, et cetera. But then when I became an occupational therapist, that was a pretty coveted area to get into. And it isn't usually where you start. So I actually started by seeing adult patients in the hospital in acute care. And over some time, I kind of kept saying that I was interested in that environment. And lo and behold, at some point, the therapist that was working in the NICU at the time needed someone to back her up. You know, when she would go on vacation, babies just didn't get therapy. There was no one to take her place. And
Mm.
so they sort of asked if anyone was interested in being trained in that environment. And I raised my hand, and knowing really nothing about it from a clinical perspective, except, some regular hospital stuff. So I was very lucky to be mentored by someone who really knew what they were doing. And then she eventually left that environment, and I was on my own, kind of pioneering that by myself from there on. So I I fell in love with the NICU. I stopped seeing adults as soon as I could. I loved seeing adults as well, but there's just something about that NICU environment, those precious babies and their families. And it's just such a protected little microcosm that I didn't really want to spend my time anywhere else once I was in there.
Mm. I I know there's so much wisdom to kind of glean from just that experience being around newborns, being around, in the NICU. Curious, what if you were to just look at some of the biggest lessons in your life? And I know I love that you write this. I want to ask this question in a moment. What if you cared for your life the way that the NICU cares for its patients? Like I was like, oh, that's really so. Let's talk about that care and some of the greater lessons that you've seen over the years.
Yeah, so many. I mean, I think the when I say the babies taught me lessons, it sounds really funny to some people, but as a therapist in the NICU, part of most of our job, or a lot of our job, involves observing them and observing their behavior, and getting really good at watching their really subtle signs of stress and when they are regulated. And so that alone taught me a lot about just human stress and regulation, and knowing what the most fragile people on the planet, what stressed them out and what calmed them down, worked in our regular lives too. And so I didn't even honestly use that information in my own life for a really long time. It seems kind of funny in
Mm,
retrospect. But watching, let's say, how their environment affected them, the loud noise, the bright lights, the hustle and the bustle, how it took their energy because their system wasn't able to process it, like we could. Uh, and then what things could we do to preserve or protect their energy, were very similar to things that help us. What is our environment like? Is it taking energy from us, or is it giving us energy? Um, how are we, how we approach them? So, not to startle them, to talk to them before we touch
mhm,
them. A lot of the kind of sensory input and things that help them process the world really help us process the world. We just kind of can do it at a higher level. And one of the biggest lessons that I took overall was just that in the kind of the history of the NICU, the focus was always on survival, and rightfully so. The parents and everyone wants the baby to survive is the number one goal. But my world is developmental. And what we were seeing when I started there, 20 plus years ago, was that yes, we weren't like allowed to see those babies in the beginning until they were way more stable. But by then, they already were showing some problems
mm,
developmentally, and they were still in the NICU, like they were still preterm. But so what that really taught me was that we don't have to just survive, that we're all more than survival. And that we can, even in a period of survival, when we all feel like we're in survival mode in different parts of our lives, we can kind of thread things through that time period that help buoy us, that help support us, that don't let us sink so low for so long, help preserve our energy. And that when we start to pay attention to where our energy is being scattered all day long, just like we were watching with the babies, we can also learn how to shore it up and how to use it for our own growth and development, just like we were doing for them. So those are some of my overall, I mean, there are so many things.
yeah.
But I in my own life felt like I was in survival mode and didn't realize it.
Mm.
And finding my way back from that really burned out place was attributed mostly to a lot of these lessons I learned from how to take care of babies.
Oh, this is really powerful. Can you tell us a little more about, if you're comfortable, some of those survival challenges that you went through and how I love the focus on energy. We talk a lot about energy here. How
Mhm.
you kind of shored up your energy, what that was like in your own life?
Yeah, so I mean, this was many years ago, but I was pre starting the organization, et cetera. And I was, in retrospect, I would say I was really burned out. But what that looked like didn't make sense to me in what I would have considered burnout or what I hear. I wasn't, not able to get out of bed, or I wasn't totally removed from anything that was meaningful for me. I was more on a hamster wheel. So I was at the time, in my, early to mid 30s. I had two young kids. My husband and I had been through a period of time, I'd say about 5 years before this total exhaustion, where we had, my husband had been fired from his job. We had been living in our dream house at the time. We eventually lost all of our money through that experience and subsequent things. And then also around that same time, one of our children was the victim of a crime and we all then went through this whole period of time where we were just in survival mode, emotionally, financially, court and police and things and everything you might expect from an experience like that. And at the time, we were just running through, that life and in survival mode. And then, in order to sort of, as part of the, reaction or response to the financial part, eventually had an opportunity to become a consultant. So while that all sounds lovely in my bio, maybe, it came at a time where I really needed it. And it was a great opportunity financially because as a therapist in the NICU, I couldn't really make any more money than I was making at the time. But this gave
Mhm.
me a way to go outside that. And I kept my day job, started consulting, but that meant I also traveled. So I was traveling, working my hours in the NICU, and then trying to, do my part of keeping our family, above the surface with these other things that were going on. And so, several years of that in a row, I just found myself in a place where I was running on the hamster wheel, meaning I was so busy. My calendar was packed. You know how it is to have young kids. You're just, everything, every day is full, and then the work, etc. But part of it was I was also, the hamster wheel at some point became a function of my not wanting to pay attention to those things either. Um, and to just not have to deal with the pain of a lot of that. And so I came to a point where uh, I literally was just like, I don't know what I need to do for myself, but I knew that I didn't recognize myself anymore. I was just, I'd kind of given up all my hobbies. I just lost myself, which we can do even just in work or motherhood or anything, just anyway. So I kind of found my way to a retreat and onward from there. But that's sort of what got me to that place in my life.
Oh, I so appreciate Sue. I'm so sorry you had to go through that. I mean, I'm as an empath and just somebody who's, like caring and in the moment with you, I'm just imagining myself with my two kids, that precious, like, and tough time when they're younger, and to lose the house and the job and money, and then to have I can't even imagine having the crime situation, and then you are, literally, and I think I know, my listeners, I know can relate. I know there are going to be people listening that are like, yeah, I have felt like I've lost myself. And you said I couldn't even recognize myself anymore. Um, in addition to going on the retreat, what are some of the things that have helped you kind of shift your energy? And how might that be connected to what you've seen work within the NICU?
Yeah, so I think first I had to just, Jill Bolte Taylor really taught me this, because I found her book somewhere and all of that too. And her, famous quote of, please take responsibility for the energy you bring into the space,
Yeah.
really hit me in this whole period of my life. And I one of the first things I tried to do was just become aware of this energy thing, that there I could even notice it. And then so I would sort of picture, waking up in the morning and kind of going through a day and just observing where my energy was going with no judgment, just sort of like, where does it usually go? I've never paid attention. um, and then, and just observing, because I was already a trained observer of these tiny babies that are these subtle, subtle signs and cues, but I wasn't doing that in my own life at all. And so I was trying to turn that objective observational lens on my own life. And so I just kind of first was just trying to be aware and watched where it was going. And then I had to think about, just like I would in the NICU, this is where this, baby's energy is going. Maybe it's to stress or pain or temperature or, environmental things. How is it being wasted? And versus how is it being actually invested? Because those are two very different things. We can invest our energy, and babies can invest their good energy and calories and things into growth and development, or they can be wasted and they don't gain weight, and they don't develop new lung tissue and synapses in their brain. And I mean, it's real, so
Mm.
trying to watch that play out in my own life and say, okay, here's where my energy is going, and understanding at a really deep level that I have a choice in where my energy is going most of the time. I mean, we all have things, life and things where energy is just spent. But there was a lot more under my control than I would have imagined and that I would have believed. I mean, I would have had to really convince myself, thinking like, no, I don't have control over A through E, but really I had a lot more control than I thought. And so I started to look at those things, like just writing down everything I was doing in my life and looking at what do I really, what is something that I'm really investing my energy in that I want to do anymore? And what am I wasting my energy on? Just literal things in our calendars that, we've signed up for, but they're just stuff we've signed up for. They're not anything we're passionate about. They're not connected to any higher vision for our life, whether it's personal or professional. They're just things. And so I started to prune those things and say, what can I let go of? And where do I want this to go? So hamster wheels don't go anywhere. And I wanted to try to invest my energy in somewhere that actually had traction, that would, and not move my life towards some shiny goal. I don't think there is one, honestly, but would move it forward, and I would feel present and purposeful, and that I would feel it all, because I was quite numb.
Gosh, there's so much in here. I'm just so clear that this is speaking to the heart of you, beloved listener, because I know for my own self, and I know just from the notes I'm getting, and those listening, there are so many of us that find ourselves, 2 years in, and like looking and realizing, my gosh, I'm numb. I don't even feel like myself anymore. I don't recognize myself. And what you're saying, Sue, this is so helpful. I'm just making a note because I know for my note takers out there, I'm going to add this in the show notes. But I'm almost, I'm hearing like really this recipe to restoring your energy. It started with awareness and observing without judgment, which brings in mindfulness practices. And then you said observing. I love this, where your energy has been wasted and where it's invested. Kind of what you saw would be life or death for a baby, um, in some ways is life or death,
Yes.
was life or death for you, or at least, really getting you back to your center. And then realizing you had a choice where your energy is going. And I love this actionable item. You looked at your calendar. This is a place, I think, anyone listening who feels this way, exhausted, overwhelmed, like you're not thriving, you're surviving, all of these things. Look and see. And I love what you said. What am I doing that gives me energy? And what am I doing that is wasting my energy? And you started to prune and really look at getting rid of, removing things that are not adding. So keep going, because I think this is so powerful. These are great action items. I always like to think about, what can we do? Like, what can we do to restore that energy, our life force, our vitality, our sense of self?
Yeah, and I think uh, that our calendars are sort of the final wrestling mat. I did a lot of work to get to the
Yeah.
calendar, but uh, my what I realized was the calendar was a reflection also of my intentions. And if my calendar didn't reflect my intentions, like I could say all day long that my family was my priority, that eventually starting the organization was a priority, but if my calendar was still full of a million things that had nothing to do with those few highest priorities in my life, I wasn't really living my intentions. I wasn't directing my energy in the right way. So I picture, I'm a real visual person. So I like to picture that my intentions like direct my energy.
Mm.
So the energy is there. I get to choose how to spend it and direct it for the most part. And over time, I got better at that. But then, setting intentions about where to direct it was helpful. And I did that in the NICU too. It became part of my practice over time. I mean, this was over a lot of time. I didn't like wake up one day and have rainbows and all the answers, or I will never have all the answers, of course. Um, but in the NICU, I realized that while through my therapy lens, I knew how careful we had to be with every movement, with turning the baby over, how slow we were moving, not to startle them and wasting that energy, and keeping their little limbs contained to their body, all the things I knew conserved energy and helped their development. Um, and so, but it also, I noticed that, the NICU is a busy place like any ICU. And it can get it seems odd outside of there, but it can get very kind of just like any other job, in that you're like, next patient, next patient, next patient. And it's hard to sometimes stop and be mindful, even though we're doing this very important work that seems like innately you would you would stop a little. It can be so busy and hectic, and that it's hard to do so. So one of the things I actually did there before I ever did my life was kind of come up with a little way to use intention in a practical way. Because I mean, I'm an OT, we're practical minded people. Like, how do I do this is really important to me, not just how do I think about it. And I love inspiration and I love all the things, but I want to know how to do the thing in the end. And so, I in the NICU started to see, okay, well, when I have to wash my hands to go to the next patient, that's a transition. And then I'd walk into that bed space, and I started to see, oh, this bed space is theirs, not ours. So uh, how do I leave everything that I was just thinking about and go into that bed space and into that baby's life? And so over time, I made what I called a 5-second rule of intention for there. And I knew it had to be
Mm.
quick. I knew I had to be able to do it in my head. Um, and so I would just pause and breathe, like most good things. And just, so to separate, reset myself, just take a full deep breath, which I realized I wasn't doing at all day long. Um, and then I would do something that I would call checking my baggage, um, which would be whatever was on my mind, whether it was real like baggage in my life. I pictured it like luggage, and just visually pictured I'm dragging my baggage to the bedside with me. And if I don't check it outside that space, I'm literally just might as well shove it in the incubator with this tiny human.
Mm.
Um, because it could be something I'm just annoyed about from the day. It could be real baggage, like, all the past things and trauma, blah, blah, blah. Um, I had to figure out a way to let that go, because as we know, like, tiny, fragile beings, or most beings, all of us, respond to somebody else, respond to what anybody else's vibe is. And it comes through our hands with these babies. If you're in a hurry, you turn them over faster, you do things more quickly. They can't
Mm.
tolerate that. So I would pause and breathe, check my baggage, mentally say, okay, you stay over there. Um, and then I would call them by their first name, because that doesn't always happen. And it was, a sign of respect of their individuality, but also kind of grading their sensory input, just like us. Like, if someone comes up to you from behind and touches you, you are startled. And if they say something first, you probably won't be. Um, and then I would give them human touch instead of procedural touch. And at least at first, so we were helping them build a sensory system over time. And then I would set an intention. So those were my kind of 5 things. And
Mm.
I would just set an intention for the next, 20 minutes I'm going to be in their space. And it could be really simple. Like my intention is that Emma feels safe during this procedure that the nurse is going to do. Just something very simple, but it changed not only her moments, but it changed me in the moment. And I
Mm.
was like, oh, this is interesting. Like at the end of a day of being more intentional with them, I had more energy. Whereas it feels like being intentional is just like one more thing to do, on our list of trying to be a good person list or whatever. And instead, it really gave me energy to be purposeful and to set those intentions and know that I was doing better things. So in real life, I tried that without all the 5 things of just breathing, checking the baggage, and setting an intention. And one of the things the NICU taught me was to do that visually, like when I would go into a transitional physical space, like from my office into my kitchen, or I came in from the car into the house, or I clicked into Zoom, or whatever the transition was, I could pre-decide what energy and intention I wanted to bring into that moment. And that has been probably one of the most life-changing nuggets for me, that I've learned
Mm.
from them.
Wow, Sue, that is, I want to reflect it back just and also to make sure everyone listening like hears that again. What you just shared, it's so powerful. By the way, we're all about actions here because we love, love, love. I love great theory and ideas and ways to improve. But everyone, you know me by now. I'm like, okay, what do we do? How do we do these things? Because we want to implement, and I just, first of all, I love the visuals. I love this, you gave yourself the 5 seconds, the pausing, the breathing. I love this idea of not just, okay, I'm going to check my baggage, but literally picturing. So for those of you who are visual, you might picture like what Sue did. I love that. I was like, oh my God, I'm going to picture my luggage, like my actual luggage, leaving it, checking it with the flight attendant, the flight people,
Yeah.
the airlines, putting it by the door. It's not with you anymore, and then you setting your intention. And, it's interesting because we've done a lot around intentions here. I have intention cards. I believe in intentions. It's directing, like you said, directing the energy. But what's not talked about a lot is the pre before you set the intention. Are you in that space for the intention? And this is really that pausing and the checking your baggage is huge. And it reminds me of Dr. Jill's quote, that what we're looking for, the after effect is managing your energy. But it's also pointing to something else, which I think is how powerful we are as human beings, where we get to determine our energy. And there's someone who has this quote, and I'm forgetting who it is, that we can pre-pave our energy with
Mm.
anything that we're doing. And I really hear, this has become a gift and a game changer for you. And I'm so excited to share this here because I've experienced this myself, not in this way. And I love how you explained it. This is something we can all do. And we get to decide, like you said, I love this. You get to decide you have choice, you have agency at all times, how you are going to use your energy. And you may not think it, you may not know it, but there's such great examples here. I really appreciate what you shared. Hello, friend. I just wanted to take a quick moment to share something really amazing with you. I've recently launched a wonderful membership community for conscious coaches, and I think you're going to love it. It doesn't matter what kind of coach you are, whether you focus on life, spirituality, art, business, health, wealth, wellness, or anything else. This community is designed to support you in building your business from an intuitively guided place and while helping you attract the perfect clients to make a bigger impact. I also want to say that we are going to be meeting bi-weekly with me, yours truly, and I'll be leading and guiding you through some of the most important practices that I've used over the years to manifest success and to raise my vibration. We'll also explore some powerful healing tools and strategies that I call woo tools. which really are about helping you to tap into the wisdom of oneness. If you heard my recent episode, then you know what I mean. You can check it all out at juliereisler.com/inner circle. This is a big hearted community where we are going to dive deep into how to be magnetic and manifest the abundance and clients that you want authentically. We'll also be bringing in experts and authors to help you develop your mindset, your branding, and tap into your heart intelligence and greater wisdom. If you're interested, you can check out the community at juliereisler.com/inner circle. We would love to have you join us. Namaste.
Thank you. So we're all bringing some kind of energy, whether we are intending to or not.
Yeah.
I mean, we're showing up with something, and to be able to think, oh, I can choose, and even talking, and I've used this, of course, and then in my organization and business, and I was just meeting with a business a couple weeks ago in person, and they were mostly guys, and it was just really fun. They were more interested in this, getting on a meeting, doing a sales call, like having that little moment where they got to, set aside whatever just happened with the previous person, breathe and set an intention for whoever this was actually going to be. And just all the applications of that, I think have been very practical for me. And I don't, of course, when I first started doing this, I would remember like once in a whole day, because it wasn't a practice. It was just a thought. And then I would be like, oh yeah, I'd go through a whole afternoon and think I haven't thought of that once. So I think we also have to give ourselves permission to it is a practice, and once is better than zero. And then we just kind of go from there. And it was it was just intrinsically rewarding to me. So I would keep trying it. It was just kind of fun. I mean, I just made it like, let me see how this feels going into a different environment, or, in my kids' lives, or, coming in from when my kids were younger and coming from the garage to the house, and, like walking in and like the destruction that is like grade school children in your kitchen, and the dog fur and the homework and the stuff all over the counters. And so if I had just taken a second to do that, and kind of the energy and the intention, it just changed who I was in the moment for them. And it doesn't mean that then everything was fine and perfect and we lived happily ever after, but it just every day made me more purposeful. And that I gave myself permission to pause a lot.
I love that.
And in the NICU, when you see the baby having signs of stress, which are inevitable because of it's a stressful place, and they have to have procedures and things, and even diaper changes can be very stressful on a little 1-pound person. And so, just being able to, when they are stressed, we don't like push them through it. We can't. They don't have the capacity to. So when there are subtle stress cues, we recognize when they're subtle, and we stop and pause and help them regulate and get back to a baseline before we do anything else. And that was instructive for me as well. And that's part of that survival mode. We don't have to just push through and hope we get to the end with any breath in our lungs. We can notice. I wasn't noticing my own subtle stress cues. I wasn't noticing the exhaustion. I was falling asleep, sitting straight up, getting my hair cut. That would seem like a I was falling asleep everywhere once I would actually sit still. And so, again, just noticing when it's subtle and becoming that observer of yourself. If we can stop then and regroup, rest, pause, whatever regulates your system, and kind of come back to some sort of baseline before moving on, it's super helpful, whether it's for a few minutes or days or whatever, that depending on the situation. But the pushing through is a narrative that we all get, to just keep striving and just keep pushing. And I've just seen that there's very little evidence that doing so without some regulation along the way is harmful in the long term. It may be short term adaptive, but is long term is not.
I'm just to go back for a moment. I'm thinking about your example with this baby Emma, whoever it was, and you
Mhm.
were talking about, the just learning through their cues, watching them, just even how you put your hands on them, how you approach that moment. And it just occurred to me, there's a sacred reverence there. There's an honoring of this little person, this baby. Um, and the translation of that is, how to do that with ourselves, even though we are, at this point, young children, but as an adult, how to have that same reverence for yourself and to learn. I love what you said about, regulating comes from pausing, comes from observing. You were sleeping in the chair getting your hair cut. Like that is that's an indication something is off. And I
Yes.
actually have been there, and it's a little scary. um I This wisdom that you've gleaned is so powerful, and I think so needed, especially. I know you who are listening, high achieving, ambitious. We're all the achiever types. We're all wanting to, the pushing, the like just making it happen. That can be so damaging. And to really get that. And anyhow, it's powerful, your experience and how you really rewired yourself to shift your energy. In your book, you talked about words are made of energy. And I thought it would be kind of interesting, as we're talking about energy, to talk a little more. I love this topic about the words and their energy and how that's connected.
Yeah, I think words are so powerful, and they kind of deliver an energetic message to us. And um, they often tell us exactly what that person's intentions are without much further explanation. And I give a few examples of it in the book, but one of them was a not a flight attendant, but a gate agent at the airport. Kind of when I was late for a flight and trying to get on another flight, and one of them just not looking at me, barely looking up, and just saying, I'm sorry, your plane has left. Um, Nothing she could do. And another person saying, come here, honey. Just the difference, like in the energy and their helpfulness. Same airline, same shift, same bosses, same whatever. One person's energy in their words. I was on a Zoom call once with a group of professionals who, and one of the key stakeholders, wouldn't, just didn't turn her video on, which whatever. And but then just said, I'm here, I'm just lurking in the background. And I remember
Ooh.
thinking, that's a fascinating sentence. uh, Energetically. So I think our words are important, and how we say them and how we use them can really change the energy in the room. You're delivering some of that energy through your words. And uh, we there's a lot of our culture that is um, carried on our words as well. And when I was teaching different feeding practices in the NICU, a lot of the words that we were using at the time were very unsupportive energetically to parents. They were just regular healthcare words, but we would say things like,
Mm.
I got your baby to take a certain amount of their feeding, and just those words. Uh, there's babies have to take more and more breast milk or formula to gain weight and go home. It's a big indicator of sort of on the way home is that you're gaining weight and eating by mouth. And so as providers, we might say, like, I got your baby to take this much. And if the parent didn't, quote, get their baby to take that much, they by default felt, of course, like, why did my baby eat better for somebody else? Why am I not good at feeding my own baby? So like our words are full of energy. And I think that they speak a lot to the culture, that the unwritten culture in places. So I think it's really interesting to just pay attention to the words that we all use in all of our environments, in our own families, as parents, maybe as business owners. What are the words that we're using with the people that we care about in our lives? Because I have found myself at times using very unsupportive words and just not the words that I would want to use. And I would start to notice words that are just my words for procrastination or my words for something I don't want to think about right now. So again, just kind of observing in our environments what we're saying, when we show up to dinner around with our families, what are our words, and how do we speak to our kids when they're, having trouble in school? How do we make them feel with our words about their grades, their performance, and all of that? So I think it's a lot is riding on the words we choose to use, and all we can do is get better at observing them and then saying, how does that feel when I say that to other people, and get better at it.
Oh gosh, I'm obsessed with this topic, Sue. It's actually one of the chapters in my first book is words become your world, and I'm like, I could not agree more. And I love, to even add to it, I love what you're saying. Like, really, really notice, like you realize there's some words. I hear this often with like, well, maybe like listen to the words because they're, and are they aligned with your priorities? I even think back to your calendar exercise,
Mm.
Are those words supporting life-giving energy activities or not? And if not, tweak them. So it's like listening to the words you say to others and to yourself, to both.
Yeah, and I was using
Yeah.
words that are very disempowering to myself, like I am a 9 on the Enneagram, so for all you Enneagram fans. So
Oh, yep.
I do have a lot of, go with the flowness about me,
Yeah.
but I would find myself when someone would say, "Do you want to do this or this or this or this?" And I would say, "I don't care."
Oh.
And so it was interesting to me to hear myself say that over and over. And I realized, after, trying to pay attention to the words and what I might be, what it might like to be on the other side of me saying that a lot.
Mm.
And what I realized was that mostly what I mean, when I'm in a healthy moment of that, is just, I don't have a preference.
Yeah.
So if it's, where do you want to go to dinner? It's not that I don't care, because that really conveys like apathy. And what it really meant to me is, I don't feel like thinking about this. That's what that really meant.
Mm.
And instead, or it meant I honestly didn't have a preference. I love all food, to be honest. So I don't have a preference. I'm happy wherever we go. So but I should say what I mean.
Yeah.
And just like with my husband, I think I joke in the book, he would say, when I was just silently then not expressing words, but frustrated, he said, I'm not sitting around thinking about what you might be thinking about, but if you just tell me what you need, I'll do anything for you.
Oh, I love that.
Or just, I was joking, like emptying the dishwasher, instead of saying, wow, I must be the only one who can empty the dishwasher, words. Just saying, asking someone to do it. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
so
These
it's,
are these are good too.
yeah. Yeah. So, all the words. Yeah.
All the words. So, dear listener, watch your words
Yeah.
because I love that, Sue. It's true though. I don't care. I actually, my husband, I'll just share it. I feel bad because he's not here to say anything, but he'll say often, like, I'll be like, "Hey, what's up? How are you?" Not bad. And I was like, not bad. And he's like, don't coach me. I'm like, well, I just am curious. Maybe there's another way to say that. That's also like, I'm doing pretty well. So he now
Yeah.
says doing pretty well. Like he didn't even notice it. But of course me.
Yes.
And I knew that was a little annoying, but it's true. I try to look at myself and I love what you're saying. Like just look at, because it does it. If it impacts your energy, it impacts everything, and then those around you.
Yes.
Yeah.
The fallout. Yes.
The fallout. Oh my gosh, that could be round 2. I love this. I love your suggestions and the reminder around this, like managing and minding the words you're using. both for clarity, both for people aren't mind readers, and to say what you mean. And also like to be in alignment, to
Yeah.
be aligned with what you're saying. Those are some great examples. I'm just curious, have you, this is a little bit off the subject, well, not really, but have you met any of the babies that have grown up along in your career? Have you gotten to meet them? Obviously, hopefully many and most are thriving, but I'm just curious what that's like to then meet these little, like tiny little humans that then become, toddlers and little kids and teens. Like, have you had the chance to do that ever?
Yes, and it's the best thing ever. Most NICUs have NICU reunions, and so we get to see a lot of the graduates there. But I've kept in touch with several families over the years, and I have several kiddos who are now a couple just graduated from college, who were
Oh my
little
gosh.
1.5 pound twins, at 23 weeks, and,
Mm.
21 years ago kind of thing, that didn't have a lot of odds stacked in their favor and who are doing so, so well. And, and others. So I've kept in touch with, several families, and it is just, they're not, unscathed. They went through a lot. But they're really doing well and thriving. And it's a real blessing. It's real meaningful
Mm.
just to see them thriving and to see their families, enjoying them and life and doing right the things that we take for granted a lot of times, just running kids everywhere and back to school and to sports and to things. And those are things they dreamed
Mm.
of, wondering if they'd ever happen. And if they ever would get to have just sort of a normal, quote unquote, normal life with normal stressors. And, it's so great to see them just in that mode, dance team and sports
Yeah.
and school. And it's really rewarding. Yeah.
Oh, that's so cool. That is so cool. Before we wrap, my last question, I've never asked this question in this way. Based on your experience in the NICU and all these lessons you've learned, how do you think that applies or informs this idea of being your Youest You?
Mm, it's a great question. I think it informs being your USU because one thing that's so clear when you come up to the bedside of this little fragile person is that they are unique in all the world. There's never been this baby with this family in this situation, and they and how you would never compare that little baby to like the baby across the way and say like, you're worthy, you're not, you're this, you're further ahead. It would just be nonsensical. And I think that it starts there. And what we lose sight of, as we become adults, I think, is what makes us uniquely ourselves. And that sometimes we're ashamed of the things that make us uniquely ourselves, because we all have things along the way and stories and baggage and experiences and maybe things that didn't go the way we wanted, things we wish we would have done differently. But the really amazing thing is, just like with watching one of those babies develop all along the way, is we're really just collecting all of those moments and all of those stories and all of those experiences along with our genetic stuff we were born with. And the combination of all of that is just literally unlike anyone else on the planet. And when we learn to honor that and to work through the stuff that's hard for us, over time, and I think we can become continuously just the highest version of ourselves when we're willing to believe in that uniqueness, in our own light, in our own gifts, and that it's really hard to see our own gifts. I think other people are much better at seeing them for us. So if you don't know what yours are, ask somebody else because they'll tell you. And um, but I think honoring, just like we would a baby in the NICU, just honoring that unique life and all of the things that go into it. Um, when you shore that up and use it and invest it, something you'll create something that only you will ever create, or a path that only you will ever see. And the world needs a lot of that.
Mhm. Drop the mic moment, Sue. I'm like chills. I have no other words other than that was beautiful. That was really beautifully said. Yeah, beautiful. Thank you. Thank you. Your heart, your intention, your presence, clearly your consciousness, and I can tell that your desire to be your Youest You, your best self, to continue growing in your own journey. It's such a gift to talk to you, to share your wisdom here. And I know that this conversation is going to uplift anybody who listens, for real, truly. And just so appreciate the work you're doing in the world and the lessons you're sharing and just how you've decided to be and show up and manage and be in your own energy. Thank you so much for coming here today.
Well, thank you so much for having me and for the space that you hold. That really allows a conversation like this to happen. That's pretty rare. So thank you.
Oh my goodness. I thank you. Thank you, Sue. And I'm just going to say, on behalf of you, my beloved listener, our beloved listener, because now you're here with me and Sue, we are so grateful to have you here to be part of this conversation today. And let me know, let Sue know what really moved you and touched your heart. What did you hear that you're going to begin to implement? These conversations are all about learning, growing together, becoming your Youest You, and part of that, of course, is taking action and putting, the insights that you got into your own life. So would love to hear how this conversation is impacting you. I have no doubt that it did and it will continue. And as always, honored and blessed to be in your earbuds. Thank you for taking the time to spend on yourself and being, as Sue said, I love this, your unique, incredible Youest You. Lots of love.